Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bun Bun. This is our Criminal Record Season 1, Episode 7 reaction and review. Do we have any answers? Or do we just have more questions? This is the sort of episode that makes you feel that way.
Yeah, I was really excited about this confession because I was like, how much is Daniel really going to tell her? Is he going to tell the whole truth of everything that went on? And watching through this episode, I was kind of like, this story seems like it's painting him out to be the guy who did his job the best that he could. And I was just kind of like, something still kind of smells fishy. Like, yes, there was lots of pressure on him at that time, and he may not have been seeing some of the things that were going on around him because of losing his wife. His daughter is alone, contacting him all the time. He has a lot of pressure from the higher ups to, like, pin this on Errol, make an example. But is that enough for him to really just do this? Like, this really felt like he was like, listen, I was unsure at first, but as I went on, I became more sure, and these are the reasons why. Good job, me. I was also under a lot of pressure in a really dark place. It felt like I was watching a YouTuber, like,
Oh no.
apology
Oh no.
video. He's gonna bust out the ukulele and be like, I'm so sorry. I was under so much pressure. It was such a dark time. Let's all get on the train.
Next thing you know, he's going to start saying, I'm sorry if you were offended
Yeah.
by what I said. Okay,
Yeah.
this is kind of where I'm coming from it, and there's no way I'm going to be able to top what you just did with that analogy, but I think there is 95%. There's a chance he's 95% being truthful, but I think the thing is that 5% that he's not being truthful may be incredibly important and could entirely change and shift the course of everything that's going on here. Or
Yeah.
if we are to argue that, okay, maybe Daniel is being 100% truthful with the facts, that doesn't mean that he's being truthful with the sentiment behind the facts. I think there's a lot going on here when it comes to missing nuance, missing intent, missing emotional background on things because, here in America, and I'm not trying to be like, I don't know a lot about the British, criminal justice system. I'm gonna say that
Yep.
from the start. But, one of the big presumptions we have here is, of course, innocent until proven guilty. And I think that's probably the same way in Britain. But I feel like a lot of what's going on with Daniel in this episode is that he's going into this with this presumption that, okay, Errol is probably guilty. So I just need to do everything that I can to make sure all the evidence sticks. And yes, there are times when he's like, I don't have enough, we don't have enough. But I never felt like in this episode that he was really ever trying to clear Errol as innocent. But I think because he went into it with that story through that lens, he probably missed some things and
Mhm.
he was probably just willing to convince himself of stuff because there's nothing that concrete in anything that he finds leading up to this confession.
No, there really isn't. And I think because of what's going on with at home with his daughter calling him, that he is being distracted into a bunch of different places, that he just isn't looking at things as clearly as he should be. Some of his focus is taken elsewhere. And because he has the type of pressure that he does from the higher ups to be like, it has to be him. You need to, get him on this whole thing. Like, there's enough there. You can get the evidence. And if you can't, we can get a confession. It just feels like he's not looking at Kim and Tony the way that he should be. I
Yeah.
mean, like, is it really just a case where the higher ups just want to pin this on Errol and they think they have enough, and all of them are like, yeah, we can do this? Is that really it? That's the story?
It's so complicated. It feels like we're missing a lot. I mean, granted, that's probably why there's one more episode, but we're going to piece together everything that we saw and heard in this story, what it means, how Daniel is getting all this wrong. But before we do, hit that subscribe button for more on Criminal Record leading up to the finale. I hope that we get a lot of answers. I hope that they're not rushed because there's a lot of stuff we still don't know at this particular point.
Yeah, and we don't know, again, how much of this confession is true and how much is not. I think that he's given enough truth in it
Mhm.
from his side of things that should convince June. But the one thing that June was asking about never got explained very well, or really at all, which is, Why was Daniel taking this pen, pointing it at his throat, pointing it at
Yeah.
his chest? We didn't actually really see how Errol knew that that was what was going on, unless it was just sort of this like power of suggestion by doing it and hoping that he would catch on to do that. But that seems like a huge risk, really flimsy. Like there was no actual explanation on why Daniel was doing that and Errol was parroting it.
I kind of feel like in this, tinfoil hat time, I feel
Tinfoil
like
hat.
there's probably a small discussion that happened before they got into that room that we did not see, where Errol probably made it clear that this is what he was going to do, and Daniel was just sort of like, I will guide you. I will do this because I think how we got here is ultimately a function of the idea that Daniel just basically messed with Errol's head so much over the course of these days that he just wore him down to eventually the point where he felt like, okay, maybe I did do this. Maybe there is no other explanation as to what's going on. And it's like, it's a series of events. I mean, it starts really to me like the first real thing that kind of gets the ball moving here is we saw them questioning Mustafa, in this episode. But as we know from the past, Mustafa just did not identify the right person and
Mhm.
basically set up a chain of events here that was very, very bad for Arrow. And we know that Mustafa feels horrible about it. He just hasn't come forward. I'm still hoping that he does. But that's like issue number one.
Mhm.
Then issue number two, and this is a pretty big one at this point, is everything that happens with Errol's father and what is learned through that conversation. And I think once again, it just reinforces in Daniel's head what he wants to be true as opposed to what is actually true within this moment with him and Adelaide.
Yeah, I think the moment with Errol's dad was the moment that he felt the connection was there because before for Daniel, it was kind of like, okay, so Errol took these genes and now he's a murderer. Like this connection
No.
is nothing. This is paper. This doesn't connect. You
Yeah.
you don't go from you've taken some genes and now you're killing somebody. Like no. So I think we did see him go through those stages where he started to collect little bits of evidence here and there. It's still all not necessarily connected to him killing Adelaide. Like even him having that fight with his dad when he was 17, he's
Yeah.
much older now, where he actually stabbed his dad does not mean that he then also stabbed Adelaide. And I know that there was also, he went to go talk to Patrick. Patrick overheard what he heard, where he was like, they were having fights about money. He was saying that he would, knock her out, lay her out, sort of thing, but that he still didn't do anything at that point. People get heated and shout and say all kinds of things.
Yeah, like that. I think in Daniel's head, it might be like number three to us in terms of like the moments that we saw, but Daniel had this information a little bit beforehand. But
Mhm.
he is sort of just assuming, okay, this is all the evidence I therefore need. And that, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not good that Errol said this, but at the same time, it also doesn't equate to him actually doing anything.
Yeah, because one of the other things that Daniel was really stuck on was, he was like, listen, Errol's been like stopped 9 times. And under these 9 times, there has never been a knife on him. There has never been a weapon
Yeah.
on him. Like, how is there any sort of connection to him actually doing something like this? That's why I think that moment with Errol's dad, that was the moment that he was like, now I feel confident. I know that he's capable of it because if he can do that to his dad, he can do this to Adelaide.
This is what I mean. There's a million reasons why I'm upset with Daniel Heggerty at this moment, but this is a big one to me. Is that this story with Errol's dad? He never corroborates it from anybody else. He's just like, okay, Errol's dad, I'll
Yeah.
take you at your word. I'll say that exactly this happened. Like we don't know exactly the circumstances as to how this happened. Errol may have felt threatened. There might have been something else going on in this situation that we just don't know, and we haven't even really seen Errol's dad at any other point leading into this. I mean, we saw a lot of, poor Doris, rest in peace, but like we haven't seen Errol's dad. And so it's just very flimsy that we're going to be like, okay, here's the facts. We have information from this one person. We have this stuff that Patrick said, and it was in a moment of duress when he was hearing these two fighting. And
Mhm.
you mentioned it. I mean, there's all this unrest going on in the streets. Errol takes the jeans. I think the police are trying to find a way, pin something on somebody who was involved in all of this, and just so that they can ensure that, okay, you know what, there, we made an example out of everybody. We have our good PR, whatever it is we need from all of this. And it's just obviously unbelievably gross, but
Yes.
because Daniel is so, I think, transfixed on this and transfixed about his orders and stressed out and all these other excuses, like he's not willing to look in any other direction. So if you are somebody who he was working with, a Kim, a Tony, maybe somebody else, like you're not even really going to look in their direction. And that probably enabled them to do whatever they had to do, provided that they were involved in this death.
Yeah, here's the thing about it. Why wasn't Daniel pulled from this? Like, they all know what had happened to his wife, that he was going through it, his daughter's going through it. Like, why wasn't he just pulled from it? Or why didn't he pull himself from it? Like, it's seemingly from the story that he told
Yeah.
that he trusts Tony and Kim. I mean, when Mustafa was brought in, they were like, "Oh, do you want to come in and do this as well?" No,
Mhm.
no, no, they got it. So he trusts them and he trusts other people to get this done. Daniel doesn't need to be in on this. And as we saw, like the chaos with like calls for pressure, calls from his, daughter, calling about the omelet, like everything
Yeah.
that's going on, he needed to be removed from it.
Yeah, and I don't think it's any coincidence that, his two biggest pieces of like quote unquote evidence that are going on here are both circumstances that involve a parent and a child. And everything with, Errol's father and then everything with Patrick. That this is all striking an emotional nerve for him because he's still grieving the loss of his wife. He's
Mhm.
struggling as a parent himself. I think he's telling himself through all of this, I'm a good father. I'm doing everything I can for Lisa. I'm doing my job. I'm making money. Not really, I think, sort of realizing that
Yep.
if you really want to be there for your daughter, the best way to do that is to actually be there and take more time away from the force and basically be like, if I lose this job for the sake of my daughter, it's okay. I'll find another job down the road. Like family is way more important than anything else.
I think the case ended up becoming a little more personal once he like really met Patrick and the idea that Patrick is now without his mom, like,
Yeah.
and his daughter is now without her mom. And I think that that was really connecting for him in a lot of ways to be like, I need to get justice for this kid's mom. He's going to end up in the system. Like, this is horrible that this has happened. This happened for no reason. Like, I need to be able to help this kid so that, he can kind of have some kind of life on the other side of this. And I think that's why he keeps going back to Patrick over and over again throughout the years to, like, make sure he's okay.
Yeah. Like, I think Daniel knows he did a terrible job with this. Like, I think he may not ever want to admit it, but I think he knows he did a really terrible job with this. And even if there's nothing else that he hasn't admitted to that's a part of this story, and I think we're both in agreement, he's probably hiding at least something that he knows that isn't coming out here. But even if it's not, even if there isn't anything else, he knows that this all coming out is going to show how negligent he was in the investigation, and it's going to, probably end his career and his reputation. But it's like, is that really worth like putting a guy behind bars for the rest of his life or for however long for something he didn't do? It's just I
Yep.
just can't stand him.
There's something missing. Like,
Yeah.
I absolutely feel it. Listening to this story, I was just kind of like, there's nothing here in this story. So when we go back a few episodes where Daniel was about to let June die to hide this, I was just like, when I heard this story, I was like, June was gonna die for this story? This story? This is nothing. This is the story that everybody already knows. This is the story. The only thing that's being revealed to June really is that he lost his wife. And we saw him, talk about that throughout that whole time as well. And he was, not manipulating the situation, but finding a way to have like connection with people and be like, hey, I've just gone through this. You've gone through something similar. Let's talk.
he's trying, I think, to tell a story here where, in the event the right person eventually gets arrested for this crime, he can go back and be like, this is what happened. I was under this, that, or the other thing. He's trying to make it so that if he does get punished, which I think he would, no matter what, but if he does get punished, that it's not as severe as it otherwise would have been. He's trying to like emotionally cover his hide, and based on what we know about Daniel, he prepares a lot. So he probably prepared and practiced this story time and time again, just in case this moment arrived that he could then deliver this to June, hope that it will be enough. And if, somebody else, whether Kim or a Tony or whoever else did it, that no matter what they might say about him, she might not believe them because he's not as bad as them.
I am not going to be that happy if the reason for all of this is really just pressure on them to pin this on
I
somebody.
know.
Like, it just feels like I've seen this story before and I've seen it a lot. So something just feels like it's missing from this story right now. And I hope that I'm right on this, that they are going to reveal something else. Like, I need an explanation of why he was pointing at the neck and pointing at the chest and Errol was parroting what he said. He never explained that.
Yeah.
And when they got to the end of the story, I was waiting for June to basically say the same thing and be like, you didn't explain what I just asked you. You basically just told me what's in the report, and I can read that for myself. And you've just added some details about your wife passing and what was going on at home. So, like, can you actually explain what I watched on this DVD that was hidden in a beehive? Like, why was it hidden? Like, something is really fishy about it. But then we have, them busting in and being like, Carla's confessions
I
online. I was
know.
like, oh, oh.
This is the cliffhanger. This is where, if there's ever a time for Daniel for you to admit to what was happening here, now is the time while you and June are trying to handle whatever the aftermath of this is going to be, because maybe you still thought there was a tiny percentage chance that you could bury enough of this and that nothing else would come out. But now the entire country knows. The call is out there.
Yep.
There's no real escaping it. So you have to go into mad scramble mode at this point. Like, if you really had nothing to do with Adelaide's actual death, the best thing you can do is just, the truth will set you probably not free, but the truth will get you in less punishment and less trouble than whatever else you would be in.
If this is the actual reason that it's just the higher ups are like, we need to pin this on Errol so we can make an
Yeah.
example of him and sort of change the narrative for us, we're the good guys kind of thing. If that's the reason, they need to really like shape that in this finale where it's like, okay, they being like Daniel and Kim and Tony, that they didn't actually look at anybody else, that it was just find evidence on this one person when they started it, and they didn't really have anything on him except that he had taken some jeans and that he had left the scene with Patrick. There wasn't anything at that point.
Okay, here it's time for tinfoil hat theories for
All
the
right.
finale.
All right.
Here's what I think happened here, and this is what I think we're going to learn over time. I think there's a chance that at some point after everything happens with the confessional or whatever else, Daniel has some time with Kim and Tony, and within all of that, either he learns that, one of them was responsible, or it's a situation where they know who was responsible. They let Daniel do this because they wanted to sort of further along their own agenda. But then at that point, Daniel's already put somebody away. And they're probably like, okay, well, you know what? If you say something about this, we're going to throw all this stuff out there about you and all this stuff that you did wrong during this case. And they were sort of holding on to all of this. Like, there has to be a reason why Tony had that DVD in the beehive.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it was so shady and weird. Why would he very specifically be hiding that? And that's why it feels like he was holding it as like almost like a secret. Like, if I need this as sort of my get out of jail free card,
Yeah.
I'm going to pull this out, pin everything on Daniel, and that's where we're going to go with this. Because otherwise, why are you keeping a copy of this? And why are you keeping it hidden?
Yeah.
And there's still no explanation about it. Something else feels like it's going on here. But for this finale, man, I need to see Errol out of jail. Like, that needs to happen.
I feel like you're going to get your wish. I think that we are going to see Errol get out of prison. I don't necessarily believe that we're going to see every person punished for what they did wrong. Like, I still feel like Daniel might get some sort of punishment, but it could just be a slap on the wrist, or it could just be a brief suspension. I don't think he's going to get fully punished to the way in which he deserves. I think what's going to happen is they're going to figure out who the true killer is of Adelaide. He's going to try to like weasel his way out of some other things, and it's maybe he'll even go out there with some emotional pleas. It's like, oh, I was being forced to not say anything because I was being threatened by X, Y, or Z, and I mean, maybe he feels some guilt, maybe he doesn't, maybe this explains further why his daughter fell into everything that she's struggling with addiction because he was gone, but it doesn't really matter.
Listen, he needs to come clean with that because
Yeah.
I think it's a really important part of this story that there is pressure. There was a lot of pressure on him to only get Errol, to not actually look into anybody else. He's the guy. We want to make an example of him. You're going to find evidence, and he's the guy. There was no like actual investigation into the whole story. It was just this piece of the story. And how do we make that story then work? So, like, not only do I want to see Errol get out,
Yeah.
but there needs to be Daniel sort of coming forward to say, this is why it went like this, with a nice big public apology. And then
Yeah.
for me, if they don't catch the actual killer in this finale, I'm wondering if they're able to sort of set something up for season 2 then. That it's like, okay, so Daniel realizes he was wrong and what
Mhm.
was going on and how he ended up in this spot. Okay, he's made amends the best that he can, which is not ever going to be enough, but
Yeah.
he's done what he can, but now he needs to actually find her killer.
Yeah, and if he does that and if he works with June, it could be an interesting dynamic moving forward. Like, the good thing is June is really smart, and I think coming out
Yep.
of this episode, June's probably going to be like, something still doesn't smell right with everything that you said here, Daniel, and I think she will continue to push for answers there. And obviously, Doris's death is going to make it that there's so much more urgency here than ever before, and
Yeah.
she's going to have a lot of people on her side. So
Yes.
we'll see what happens here in the criminal record finale. Of course, we will be here to break all of it down. Hit that subscribe button so you guys don't miss that. Click on the box right there to watch our
Mhm.
most recent criminal record review. Also, join our Patreon for exclusive content there. And thank you to our patrons
Thank
for your
you.
support. We'll see you guys here next time.